Vasyl Ivanchuk has made a truly remarkable comeback in this match. So he was 3-0 down at the outset. He hung in there, fought back, scrapped a game here and there. Then he was 5-3 down after Alireza surged back. He somehow had to win 2 games on the bounce. He did it, and he sets up this decider final game now. So it's a tie-break game. Now it's not an Armageddon style where white has to win. If this was a draw, we'd go to another one, but we do have a decisive result, and it's a truly exceptional game. So let's see what happened here. Vasyl had white, and he kicks off with pawn to e4 again. We had e5 from Alireza, and we go down this line of the Spanish here with bishop to b5, a6, dropping back to a4, and now Alireza goes pawn d6. He was going with this sideline here, not doing the knight f6 stuff. And now c3 was played by Ivanchuk. In the other games, he went castles straight away. Alireza hit him with this aggressive g5 stuff. Here the g5 stuff's not so good because white hasn't yet castled. You can go h3. h5's not as powerful because you've got this pin down the h-file. So Alireza didn't go for the g5 stuff. Instead, he went bishop to d7. d4 set up the big centre here. And now g6 from Alireza. This is the standard way to develop the bishop in these structures. And now bishop to g5. It's a less common move than castles, but C'Chartres is just trying to annoy the black development here. And without going through all the details, you don't really want to block this attack on the queen with a minor piece. So f6 is the standard response. Although you weaken the king slightly after the bishop drops back, you're often going f5 soon, so it's not such a big deal. The bishop now came to g7. We had castles from C'Chartres. And now this knight wants to develop so that the king can castle. But if you come to e7 here, then d5 is annoying. Because really, if d5 is ever played, you want to drop this knight back to e7. So that's why we had knight to h6 here. So C'Chartres goes pawn to h3 here, covering that critical g4 square. We had castles from black, rook to e1, king to h8, prophylaxis coming off this open diagonal, and now this knight develops to d2. And now Alireza plays this very standard queen to e8 move, not only activating onto these light squares here, perhaps coming out here soon, but it also sets up a tactic. So this bishop and queen are now lined up in a battery. If white gets too casual, say they went a3 or something, well, you can take on d4 here. The bishop's attacked, say you take here, well, you've got the Zwischenzug, takes on f3 with check, and then you've won a clean pawn in this line like this. So if we come back here, after queen to e8, bishop to b3 was played. And now you can already go f5 immediately here, but instead Alireza goes pawn to b6. And what he's trying to do is stop this bishop coming to the c5 square, looking at the rook once we have an exchange in the centre here. And we do immediately have that captures. So C'Chartres takes. Alireza now has a decision. You can take with the f-pawn here. It's not what Alireza played. I can understand why he didn't do this though, because although you open up the rook, it's a bit tricky for this knight to now get back into the game, because say it ever comes to f7, well, it can't come to d6 because there's a pawn sat there. What Alireza does is take with the pawn here, and like I said, I do prefer this in a blitz game, pragmatic decision. This knight has a few more options in the future. So we had knight c4 now from C'Chartres, and he's kind of goading this b5 move. If you were to play it, it's positionally not good. The knight comes back, you lose some time, yes, but look at this wonderful square which the bishop will have gained access to. So Alireza doesn't go b5, he ignores that knight. He goes pawn to g5 here. So he wants to drum up some play on the king side, and that's why knight h2 was played, stopping that g4 move. The rook now came to the d-file, that's where it wants to be. So queen e2 ducked away, and now queen to g6 from Alireza. So he looks at this pawn, he prepares g4, but f3 shuts everything down. White's got a nice solid position, although at some point C'Chartres will want to bring this knight back into the game. So knight to f7 now from Alireza. He decides to improve his worst piece. The rook came to the d-file, and now best here for black was actually to go pawn to f5 immediately. There's quite a big threat here to go pawn to f4, followed by h5, get that classic pawn storm going, and so white would really have to take, then the bishop can recapture, and this piece has improved quite a bit. There could be opportunity to play e4 later on, open up this bishop, and so this would have been better. But what Alireza did was go bishop to c8 here. He also opens up the d file, contests it with white, but it's a bit more passive on that square. So a nice edge for Chucky now, but can he capitalise? So the bishop dropped back to f2, clears the e3 square for this knight. It wants to look at these light squared weaknesses. The knight came to e7 here, this one span into e3, this one completed its journey to d6, and now rook d2 from Chucky, preparing to double on that open file. So pawn a5 from Alireza, that one was x-rayed by the queen here. If this bishop ever moves, it would have been weak. The rook came to the d file, and now this rook actually dodged away. It's not an ideal move, but there was some tactical pressure down that e file, but it sets up an awesome shot from Ivanchuk. Before I show you the move, which you can maybe guess, do hit that like button if you're enjoying this video, subscribe to the channel to never miss a future one, and if you do want to donate, support the channel, help me keep growing, bringing these daily videos, then please use the link below. It's greatly appreciated, and thanks to everyone who's donated so far. So here Ivanchuk played rook takes on d6. What a move, crashing through, and he's also winning a second pawn. After rook to d8 challenging the file, he picks up on b6 here. So Chucky's whole idea here is that he can get these strong queenside pawns going. He's got the bishops pointing in that direction. This is good for white. So Alireza comes back with queen e8. He tries to reactivate. Now we had pawn a4. It stops black from playing a4 themselves. Bishop to d7 from Alireza. And now the best here was actually just queen to c2, cover the pawn, and it's actually quite hard for black to unravel because there's things like knight c4 coming into d6, really tricky. But what Chucky does is rook to b5, a double exchange sacrifice. He's so creative and dynamic and imaginative, an awesome player. So he's offering a whole exchange. Now Alireza didn't take this one right away. Then the pawn would recapture, queen d7 let's say, and the knight can come to d5, and there's an excellent light squared grip here for white, plus this bishop looks amazing, so I can understand why he didn't do this in a practical game. It's very hard for black to play. Instead he went rook b8, challenging that b file. The pawn now came to c4, and now knight to c6 from Alireza, so he's looking at this newly created weakness on the d4 square. So this knight hit d5, opens up the bishop, and now pawn to f5 from Alireza, a great move, trying to liberate his worst piece on the board, and here Chucky makes a positional mistake. So he spent only 9 seconds on this move. He should have thought a bit more. He took here, but the problem is you now activate this bishop to the f5 square, and e4 could be coming soon. Really, he should have just waited on the position, left the tension, tried to keep the pawn on e4. Because now he spent 48 seconds and the time's really ticking down for both of them, round about a minute each. So he now brought his bishop into c5. He hits this rook on f8, but Alireza plays an excellent move, knight d4, hitting the queen. Now you don't want to take this one. One, you lose a tempo, you've just moved that bishop, but also after captures here, look at this passed pawn, look at that bishop pair, and black is still an exchange up. Really nice position. So instead the queen moved away to d1, and now Alireza takes the plunge. He takes the second exchange on b5, but Chucky gets 2 connected passed pawns in compensation. These could get really dangerous. So pawn to e4 now from Alireza, another excellent move. He ignores this exchange on f8. He gives Chucky that one if he wants it. He doesn't take, because then the queen would recapture. Look at the dark squared grip, still the exchange up, black's doing well. So instead Chucky plays bishop to d4. He challenges that monstrous piece. We had queen to d7 activating, and now pawn to b6. Chucky has to get these ones going. So we had captures on d4 with check, the queen recaptured, counter check, queen g7 blocked it, and now you could drop the queen back to f2, or you could take, which is what Chucky did. Both very playable, different ways to go. By swapping the queens off the board, what he's hoping for here is that these pawns will just win it out in the endgame and there won't be any attack against his king. So knight to g4 played first. He wants to bring that piece back into the game. Alireza takes on f3. The pawn recaptures, and now he drops his bishop back to e6, opens up this attack of the rook, hits the knight here, and that's why you can't go, say, king to g2 defending the pawn, or then black simply takes. You're losing your connected pawns. Black can pick up here. This is awful. So instead of king to g2, pawn c5 has to be played. Get those pawns going. And both players are really low on time now. Chucky's got about 50 seconds. Alireza's under 30, but Alireza burns tons of time now. So he takes on f3, hitting this bishop on b3. It comes to c4, and now he goes right down to the wire on the clock. He's got about 3 seconds or so left. He takes on d5. The bishop recaptures, hitting the rook. He goes rook f5 to hit this one, but knight e3 defends and hits the rook. So rook e5 played, pressuring the knight, but pawn c6, and the clock is low, 2 seconds, ticking down. They are getting the increment. Chucky's still got about 40 odd. So the rook takes on e3 here. Excellent move from Alireza, but pawn c7 in response. What is going on with these pawns? Well, Alireza drops his rook back, defends the other one, and now if white takes here, makes a queen, well, the rook can recapture. Pawn b7 might look like a draw, but actually it's not, because long term the black king is going to march all the way round, cover the queening square, then the rook can activate and actually do some damage on the king side. This 2-on-1 with rook against bishop will be decisive. So Chucky didn't play this one. He goes pawn b7 instead. But now an excellent move in the time pressure. Alireza slips away to c8, and here Chucky actually resigns the match. I'll leave you to work out the details, but it is completely gone. Those pawns will soon be gobbled up. So what a win by the 17-year-old youngster over Vasyl Ivanchuk. I do hope you enjoyed this match. If you want to see the Magnus Carlsen versus Alireza Firouzja match, then click here, and I hope to see you again on a future video. Thanks for watching, see you soon.